Hey guys, Danny Johnson here, and today what I wanted to do was just pull out some of my most common used tools that I use when I'm working on my car. Of course, most of this is for the Ford Mustang, as you've seen on a lot of the videos that I've made, but I've also done a lot of videos on the Yukon and the Chevy Silverado and even my wife's Infiniti, some of my other cars. And so a lot of these tools will work on all the cars, and so if you're compiling a toolkit of your own and you want to know what you need, well, I'm just going to show you a few of those things. The first thing is a good breaker bar, mainly because you'll be taking the wheels off a lot, and so this really helps with the lug nuts, and an extension on it helps a lot too to get the uh, actual breaker bar away from the wheel. So as you can see here, if you have just the socket and the breaker bar, a lot of times the tire, and on the Mustang even the fender, will get in the way to where you need a little bit more distance. So that extension really helps to come in handy to get the breaker bar back just enough to get that perfect 90-degree angle back on it. So just a little tip there with the breaker bar, very helpful. Next, a 7/8 inch wrench, and this is for the O2 sensors. They do make a O2 sensor specific wrench with a hole in it for the wiring, but an open end 7/8 inch works all the time. Next, a lot of the ratcheting wrenches here come in handy. And if you can get the ones with the bendable head, that really helps on like the power steering line. It helps to use that. Really comes in handy to be able to turn this in different angles, even transmission bolts and some other things. So those are really good to have. Now, just because you go get some ratcheting ones, don't throw away your other ones, because you never know when you need a box end wrench to be steady and you want to hit it with a hammer and you don't want to break the ratcheting mechanism and those kind of things. So don't throw away any of your tools is a good tip. Next, we'll go ahead and talk about extensions. Get a lot of these. This is only showing two of them, but all these extensions and the little U-joint here really helps out a lot. Next, a 5/8 inch spark plug socket, okay, for doing spark plugs. And again, the extensions are going to really help too for this too, because you have to get down into the cylinder head. But 5/8 is the size that you need, and when you look down in it, it's good to have that rubber to help hold the plug as you're screwing it in so it doesn't just fall in, and to protect the porcelain. So very handy there. And here's a perfect example of using the socket with the U-joint and then extensions. This is the top two bolts on a transmission. This is the only real way to get them, is to go lengthwise with the transmission with multiple extensions and that U-joint. So it really comes in handy. It's going to be the difference between being able to do it and not do it. A nice pair of vice grips really comes in handy, especially you'll see in my installation of the struts and shocks to hold it still while you unbolt it, so that's a great thing to have. Next, sockets. Let's talk about this. You want 12 point and 6 point, this one being a 12.12 millimeter for the drive shaft bolts. You'll use that a lot, taking the drive shaft off for a lot of things. And so in general, I really like 6 point just because they don't strip as often, but there are times when you need the multiple teeth, and maybe you even have something that's rounded, so that helps out too. Also, extensions on the smaller 1/4 inch drive, 1/2 inch drive, the bigger ones. Any extensions and U-joints really come in handy. A nice pair of cutters and pliers is always handy too. You have zip ties and all kinds of things that you're going to be cutting and removing. So that always helps. And eventually some electrical stuff. This is just some wire strippers and crimpers and some heat shrink tube, which is really nice to really finish off a job if you're not quite doing soldering or anything like that. But that really helps out quite a bit. Next, a nice hammer that's not going to damage things, the sand hammer, and then a regular one too. Like they say, pound to fit and then paint to match, right? That's mechanic work at its finest. But some good hammers actually come in handy. And I'll be honest with you, I even use these weights. You'll probably see them a lot in the videos when you really have to pound out a pilot bearing or something, or just hit the breaker bar and give it some force behind it. The extra weight really comes in handy. And of course, you have to be careful with that. You don't damage anything. Next, a good puller set comes in handy, but a lot of times you can rent these, but you'll need this for pulling the steering wheel off or pulling the harmonic balancer off. There's quite a few things that you could use that for. Next, you'll need some of the Torx bits, and this is for the instrument gauge cluster to get that out. And also, these ones are the tamper-proof or security bit ones. You see the hole in the nose of them? That's really important for when you're working on something like the mass airflow meter. As you'll see here, it has a little nub in the middle of the fastener, and that's to make it so people don't steal it as often. But if you don't have the hole in the nose of your socket, it will strip that out. So you need the security bit or tamper-proof Torx bit set there. Next, the brake compressor tool. This I've used so many times, and it's only like a $10 tool. You'll see that in my videos. Sockets, start with like a starter kit, like a Craftsman one or a Dewalt that has all kinds of different sizes, deep socket, regular, and it's okay to have multiples of the same because sometimes you have to be on both sides of a nut and a bolt, and you need the same size. And of course, what toolbox is complete without a torque wrench? And so you could do the 1/2 inch or the smaller one too. That's really important to have. But with the sockets, like I was saying, sometimes you need two of the same ones. Sometimes you need one that's just a little more narrow or shorter than the other one. And sometimes you just need different varieties so that one might be too short, one might be too long, and you need one just right in the middle. So having multiple sockets of all different sizes comes in handy. So I have a whole drawer of mismatching different size ones, and the thing is, don't throw them away even if it's messy, because you never know when you get in that bind and you need just the right size. These little portable tool kits are also great when you want to just pick one up and take it next to the car, and so that comes in handy too. Next, we'll talk about the fuel disconnect lines. This is good for the fuel filter or the fuel rail, and so those are good to have so that you can properly disconnect the fuel line without breaking anything. And some bigger, deeper sockets are good too. Deep sockets for the lug nuts, bigger sockets for like the motor mounts. I think it was like a 22 millimeter for that one, for the motor mount. And if you want to get into it and get some of these little kits that have the Torx and Allen heads, they're nice to have. It's not a must, but you can see I've only used a few of these, the ones that are worn out on the tips. Anyway, it's good to have every once in a while, but you can get away with some smaller kits too. And one of my kits that I really like is this one because it's designed for like threaded rod basically, and so the head is hollow in the top and so are the sockets, so it makes it so that you can use it as a deep socket. Okay, so when you need to get into a really narrow area and you need a deep socket to get over a stud, for example, but you can't, you don't have a lot of room and you really can't fit a deep socket in there, it comes in handy. So there's some studs on the pulley bridge on the Cobra, similar to that one right there in the middle of the screen, like that, where you want to be able to get over the stud, but still need, you don't have a lot of clearance. So these really come in handy, and I really like them a lot. And of course, all kinds of screwdrivers, Phillips, flat, different sizes, lengths, thicknesses. You'll use a lot of screwdrivers. And a magnetic tray is always nice too. Tools as well, don't forget about the floor jack, and multiple jacks is good too. You don't have to have just the one. And jack stands. Don't skimp out on these. Make sure you have good jack stands. You do not want the car coming down on you. And going along with the jack and jack stands, one tool I highly recommend is a transmission jack. It's flat, it'll cradle and hold the transmission. If you're doing it, I wouldn't recommend doing it alone as a one-man job, but I have done it before using a transmission jack, so it is possible. Okay, and these ratcheting straps come in handy a lot. Whether you're tying down a load, if you're transporting something, or even when dropping the transmission, I slung them underneath the truck that I was working on, the F-150, and helped it to support the transmission if it were to fall. If you're lowering a K-member or doing anything like that, it's good to have a support in place in case something's going to fall. Okay, also a heat gun comes in handy for all kinds of things, from tint to melting the heat shrink tubing if you're doing some wiring, and sometimes just heating things up in order to break them loose. So these are some of the basic tools, and there's plenty more, like bearing drivers and 36 millimeter sockets for the axle nut on the Cobra, and all kinds of things like that. But just wanted to give you a basic rundown of some of the main things that you'll need. And in all the videos I do, you'll see the tools that you'll need for that video, of course. So anyway, just go ahead and put in the comments what you think. If there's anything that you use all the time that I didn't show here. And if you have any questions on repairs, go ahead and put in the comments. I have plenty of videos. Sometimes they're harder to find, and so I can easily help you find the video that you're looking for, or maybe it shows a process in the middle of a different video that I did that could help you out. And I'm making a lot of videos that also just show some of the basics, like how to get to certain bolts and how to do certain parts of repairs, since sometimes people don't want to sit down and watch the entire 20-minute video or hour-long video that I have. So anyway, as always, thanks for watching. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel, and it really helps out. And thanks for watching. I'll keep the content coming. Thanks, guys.